You're listening to the Straight A Conspiracy Podcast.
Welcome to the Straight A Conspiracy Podcast. So we've been getting requests for a long time to do some sort of podcast, and the people have demanded it, and so here we are, listening to the voice of the people.
It's true, but also the most fun part about the journey of having our book, The Straight A Conspiracy, out there has been getting all of these stories from people who read the book, who come to us and tell us about their own experiences in school, how they changed, their own careers or went back to school because of the book, and what they've learned in their own paths. And so this podcast will also give us a chance to sort of share those stories with you too, to see how the Straight A Conspiracy is affecting people everywhere.
Well, and also to then create a community where people can share each other's stories directly, because it always helps to know that you're not alone in these things and that other people have had similar experiences. And then once we can all sort of compare notes on our experiences and be like, I had that experience too. This teacher said that to me. Then we start to realize that, I was going to start to sing some Michael Jackson, You Are Not Alone, but I don't think that this is episode 1.
We don't have the licensing for that.
No, we don't. So good thing that I cut myself off there.
But anyway, wait. So, hey, what is the Straight A Conspiracy?
It's a really basic question.
We haven't even talked about that yet.
Yeah.
Also, I'm Katie O'Brien.
I'm Hunter Motz.
And I think that probably the easiest way to get into understanding the Straight A Conspiracy and how it maybe affected your life is to just think about what people said to you when you were a little kid, right? We've all had this experience. Like, did somebody say to you, I'm just not a math person, I, don't have an ear for languages, I'm not a natural writer, you're more of an athlete than a student, or you're just a creative person, that's okay. Like, I know when I was in school, even when I was doing well, like kind of the same across the board in all subjects, I had a science teacher in 8th grade who said to me, like, it's okay that you don't like science and you're probably not as good at it because you're going to grow up to be a humanitarians major anyway. And now, like, as a side note, she did say humanitarians major and not a humanities major. So points to her in that she was correct. I did become a humanities major, but points taken away. No, you know what? I am a humanitarian also. Maybe she was really looking at who knows. But anyway, like from that moment on, I was like, great, good, free pass, don't have to like science, don't have to care about science, fine. Which, stays with me to this day. But then who knew we'd write a book about science. So.
Well, and that's sort of been the great irony is that I was on the other side of that divide, that science-humanities divide, and I don't know that it was ever, that anybody ever really explicitly told me anything, but I just, from my culture picked up this idea that you can't do both.
Well, yeah,
right?
I was going to say, everybody still has that idea in mind that you're either a math science-y person or you're like an English humanities-y person. Yeah.
And the irony would be that I would then have to write a book for kids. So I think that even in our own experience, there's a good sort of reveal of what the problems are of this sort of thinking, which is that often the goals that you want to achieve require a lot of different skills from a lot of different areas.
And more importantly, you don't want to make that decision when you're in 8th grade.
Yeah.
That you're not going to try to become any of the careers that are in the world of sciences. Like, that's crazy.
And you don't want to be the kind of science person who doesn't know how to communicate your ideas
to humans,
which is science's big problem right now.
Yeah, exactly. So think about, if you're listening, think about whatever those decisions are that you made for yourself when you were really young. What did you sort of declare about your brain and how it works and what you are naturally good at and naturally not so good at? Like, think about that thing, because I know you have it. And then the point of this podcast and the point of the Straight A Conspiracy is to tell you that every single thing you think you know about your brain and how it works is a total lie. It's a lie. Like, we've all been going through school not understanding how our brain actually likes to learn. And the result of that is that we all made a bunch of decisions and declarations about our intelligence without really understanding anything about it. And we got into this because we were tutoring, working with lots and lots of students, thousands of hours, hundreds of students of every age, every subject. And all of them would tell us these things. We'd all walk in and they'd be like, okay, we can try this homework, but I'm just not good at math. I'm just not a math person.
And then very often, mom would walk through the room and be like, yes, yes, yes. You do this impression better, so I'm going to let you go.
Walks through the room, and the mom is like, oh, it's okay, it's not his fault. No one on my dad's side of the family got the math gene.
Yeah.
And they walk through, and you're like, nah, now everybody has a reason to never try
That's
in
right.
math. Yeah, and they got more specific than that, too.
Yeah, I mean, Katie and I, we've collected, you do this job for often enough, you start to collect these sort of theories, these pet theories that people have, and there are some real gems, there's one that really stands out above all, which was a student of ours saying in English to us, this is a Caucasian child, and he says to us, I'm only good at Asian languages. And he literally said that in English. So right there, your theory doesn't make sense.
But we heard, I can't do word problems in math because my brain won't do math and English at the same time.
Or when I did the Reddit Ask Me Anything, and there was a guy who was like, oh, no, I'm pretty sure some people are naturally good at some things and not others. For example, my sister got the baking gene, but I got the general cooking gene.
Right.
And a lot of what you're getting there is you're getting sibling rivalry, and you're getting oh, my sister does this thing, so that's not my thing, so I'm now going to define my thing as being a different thing. Yeah. Oh, they're the athlete, they're the academic one, I'm the class clown. And birth order plays a lot into this as well. There's a certain pattern to middle kids, third kids, what they come to believe about themselves.
But it makes sense that, you want to find the thing that you're good at that distinguishes you, and you want to feel great about what that is. It's just that it's crazy that we decide it so early, and we decided based on not knowing anything about the actual brain.
That's right.
So, once we kept hearing this from student after student and hearing it from ourselves and everybody around us, we started to think, is this possibly true? How is there a gene that makes you bad at word problems and no one has really talked about?
Or baking.
Or baking. And the reality is that obviously none of those genes exist. They have not been identified. Scientists are mapping the brain, as you've probably heard, and it's a long, ongoing process. But so far, they've found over 300 genes that are directly responsible for actual learning deficits, things like Down syndrome, things that we know are actual learning disabilities. They have found 0 genes that make you only good at Asian languages or a natural writer. Those are just things that you develop.
And even if those genes hypothetically did exist, we can't say what is or is not in the genome. There are all sorts of surprises to unpack there. But the reality is that what is humanity's superpower? And humanity's superpower is the ability to upload culture or download cultural software. It's the ability to learn from the people around us. And if you look at the sort of things that humans all across the globe have learned, right? They've learned how to survive in the desert. They've learned how to survive in the Amazon. They've learned how to survive in the Arctic. And now we're even developing tools for surviving in space. But what happens is that it's really when you start to compare how different cultures think about these things and how they learn these things that you realize that a lot of this is cultural. You start to see that, this is a very American cultural problem, this idea of only being individually good at certain things and not other things. And as we come to unpack this, you're going to start to realize that maybe some of these beliefs are actually just self-fulfilling prophecies.
They are, but that's exactly what you have to think about is think about that thing that you identified that was what you said you were good at or said you were bad at, and think about the choices that you made throughout your life because you decided this early on. When you think you're awesome at something, you're eager to do more of it. It doesn't feel like work. You love getting into it. You advance at a quicker pace because you're diving into it all the time. And that's no big deal. And you don't think anything of it because you've already convinced yourself that it's just because your brain likes that thing. Whereas when you've already decided that you are terrible at something, it becomes a huge chore. You don't want to do it. And obviously that means that you don't progress as quickly and you don't learn as much of it. And so over time, that gap gets wider and wider and wider. But really, it's just based on something you decided to believe when you were 6 years old. And so we want to end that.
Yep.
This is the end of that, right? Where you're not naturally good at that thing you said, and you're not naturally bad at that other thing.
And the way that you've been talking, Katie, is very interesting because you're pointing out something. You're saying when you were 6 years old, you decided this. But the interesting thing, of course, is that we started this book working off with teenagers and people who are very much had only recently made these decisions or were only in the process of forming those doubts about their ability. But the amazing thing about the book has been the response that we've gotten from people who are 30, 40, 65, who are like suddenly having these epiphanies about, wow, Mrs. McGillicuddy back in the 2nd grade told me this thing. And that thing has kind of shaped my entire life.
Oh, totally. When we were even having drafts of this book, one of my favorite moments was that my dad, who just turned 70, sorry Dad, this past December, was reading an early draft of the book, and we were describing that experience when you're a little kid of sitting in a class and seeing the person next to you raise their hand for every answer, and you don't know how they get it, and you just feel like, why don't I get it? And he was like, this is my whole life. Like, my teachers told me, you play basketball, you're not really a student, like, you're never going to be a school person, it's fine. And that was it. That was the decision for him for all time. And that's like dictated all kinds of things that happened in his life. And he was like, I can't believe this is me. And we're like, this is everybody.
Everyone.
Yeah.
And we just haven't been talking about it. And now we have the internet and we have the ability to have these conversations and open up about these things. And you're going to find out, again, I can't sing the Michael Jackson song, but that you are not alone. I'm just saying the words, you are not alone. I'm not singing it. I don't think that mentioning... but crucially, that sort of way of thinking, which worked to some extent in the industrial age, definitely does not work in the information age. It does not work in the 21st century. But in the 21st century, there's this great quote from Alvin Toffler, the futurist that we've become really fond of from Rethinking the Future, where he says, the illiterate of the 21st century will not be those who cannot read and write, but those who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn. That changes what the experience of school is, because the old idea of school was that you were going to learn a specific set of skills that you would then use for the rest of your life. Now,
you have one job, you do that job from the day you're hired until the day you retire. That's it.
And that's no longer the way. Nope. Things are changing, technology is changing, the environment is changing, and so you're constantly
industries come and go.
Yep.
Even if you could stay in one job for your whole career, that job wouldn't look the same from year to year.
My dream job of being a CD salesman is now no longer available to me. I was going to work at Tower Records. It was going to be great. What CD I was going to sell?
What?
Michael Jackson's You Are Not Alone.
I can't. This might be the final episode as well, guys. I'm not sure. We'll have to decide.
But yeah, you need to be able to learn, unlearn, and relearn, and that's really, so it's, and I think that's really important, something that often there are a lot of our students who are like, why do I have to learn this? And the point is that in some sense, you're right. Like, you may not use these skills going forward, but the ability to teach yourself new things quickly and to unlearn old habits and to relearn, that is this sort of what they call meta skill, or sort of larger overarching skill, learning how to learn. That is something you will use for your whole life, especially in the 21st century.
Absolutely. And just to be clear, if you're now suddenly beating yourself up and going to a dark place about having been one of the people that fell for the straight A conspiracy, we all did it. So don't go there, because the thing is that the easiest way I always think of it is like, you would never take a 12-year-old and say, hey, you've never taken driver's ed, you don't have a license, but like, why don't you get in my SUV and just drive down the highway? Like, that's a great idea. Obviously not, right? But we all send every student to school, and there's never a moment where you're taught how to actually use your brain.
Yeah.
So what happens in school is that some kids, happen upon really good work habits early on. They have a good attitude about it. They're open, and that pays off. And so they keep doing that same thing, and school goes really well. And some kids just by chance happen on, study habits that don't work as well, that are not as effective or brain friendly. And that becomes its own cycle too, where it goes poorly and then they get frustrated, and then that's its own path. And the reality is that the straight A conspiracy is, like, what is it? It's this idea that some people are just born smart, right? That's what we assume when we see the results of those two kids. We assume some people just get a good brain and some people just don't. And that's how it goes. Can't do anything about it. And the reality is, if you've learned one thing, you can learn anything. Your brain can learn anything at all in the world, any skill. You can learn a language, you can learn every word of Shakespeare, you can go to the moon, you can do all of these things. It's just about how you use your brain. So we're essentially going to give you like the driver's ed manual and road test for how to use your brain to learn anything. And you're going to see that everything that you knew about intelligence is not true. And that's what we're going to do with this podcast, is unpack all that stuff, give you all the skills, and then send you out into the world to have your whole new life.
Yeah, and we're excited to see what you do with that skill.
Yeah.
That's the fun thing is, you know, you pass this knowledge on to people, and then they go out there, they go on the internet, they remix it, they pass it on, they pay it forward, and they, you know, create things that you couldn't even imagine. And that's the sort of future that we can have, is that future where everybody is engaged, that real hive mind wisdom of the crowds is going on, and everybody's feeding off of each other in the great improv game. Yeah. And we're all passing these ideas along.
Yeah. It's going to be awesome. So we hope you stick around. Thanks for coming. Yeah.
Thank you for listening to The Straight A Conspiracy with your hosts, Katie O'Brien and Hunter Motz. While Katie and Hunter are the faces of this podcast, they couldn't do this on their own. They have been lucky enough to have a group of dedicated people help them to get these ideas out there. Brian Jennings, a media literacy expert and author from Rhode Island, edits all of the podcasts. Andrew Hunt in LA helped film and record them. Mandy Ainsley in Johannesburg, South Africa, created a better website. And Josh McKenty, a marketing guru from New Zealand who wishes that he had this book when he was a kid, is devoting his time and energy to make the message of the Straight A Conspiracy accessible to everyone, everywhere. And you can help too. To find out how, visit thestraightaconspiracy.com. It's time for everyone, everywhere to know their own potential and get equipped with the tools to unlock it. While Katie and Hunter love books, they are also screenwriters, directors, and actors. Josh McKenty had the idea to make a multimedia online version of the Straight A Conspiracy. We're calling it the Straight A Conspiracy Bootcamp. It's the one-stop shop to onboard humans into the 21st century. It will be entirely digital so we can distribute it to millions of people that much faster. If you want to support the podcast and this movement in an easy way, simply visit thestraightaconspiracy.com and click on the Amazon affiliate link before you make any purchase. Amazon will give us a piece of that sale. More money means more podcasts, and more money for a project we're very excited about, the Straight A Conspiracy Bootcamp.